welcome all of you to the Edenton Town Council committee meeting format. In addition to that, we've already had one special meeting. We gathered as a group over at the Chowan Arts Council where they gave their annual presentation on their projects and what their plans are for the future and the success they're enjoying in their new space. It was very encouraging to listen to their story and observe the fine work that they've done in their new home. So I'm sure we'll hear more on that later, but moving now to our regular schedule here at 6 o'clock. Since we last met and voted on our employee insurance plan for the coming year based upon information that was presented to us by the Soaring Group through Rand Williams. As you recall, one of the offers that we were considering at the time was one made by Cigna Group, but it was not believed at that time that the Cigna Group would hold that offer for us compared with what we had been offered from our current provider. So, surprise, if you will, Cigna did keep their offer on the table, so we invited Rand to come back and review again what our options are based upon that option still being available to us. So, Rand, if you would please, we'd like to have a quick review and your recommendation.
Okay, well, can't hold me to any more crystal ball projections since I was really surprised that Cigna was able to hold their offer, but here we are today and glad to be back. And does everybody have that presentation in front of them, or should we be pulling it up?
No, do you have it for the...
I do. I was gonna, well, I've got it on my computer, or I was thinking,
No.
is it on?
I thought you were going to bring it on your...
Oh.
Well,
Tell you what.
it's kind of last minute.
What would y'all prefer, for me to email it and pull it up? Just,
Do you have it on your computer?
I do, so I could plug into that one if that's the quickest thing. But
Okay.
I'm sorry, we had a miscommunication.
Yeah. It's kind of last minute.
Should be on. It never works that fast under pressure. I think we were ready. Okay, so if you remember the high level,
On the side. On the side, there's an orange.
so just to highlight or revisit the plans themselves and the dollars involved, you see the First Carolina Care offer at a 0% increase. And if you look down in the bottom right, the Cigna figures, it'll show you the total annual dollars based on the membership today. And then based on your employer contributions, how much the town would save. In a switch to Cigna, just in premium dollars, it would save about $40,000 annualized, assuming you have the same membership for the next 12 months. And those that cover family members or a lot of people will also save some money in payroll deductions with the lower costs. But you'll notice some tiers are a little bit more savings than others, but no matter if you're covering children, spouse, or family, the rates are lower than the First Carolina Care. Unfortunately, Cigna has a lot of plan design flexibility, so we were able to match up the components of the benefits very closely. The only things you see that are different are highlighted in orange. And the first one, First Carolina Care, had a pharmacy out-of-pocket maximum, whereas Cigna does not. And that's not really something that would come into play because your out-of-pocket max with all expenses that includes pharmacy is also $4,000. So with co-pays, I wouldn't say that's a negative per se. It would be really hard to ever get $2,000 worth of copays. And then the other one is Cigna has a telehealth program that First Carolina Care does not. But, on the high level, it's a very close match to your current benefits with that savings opportunity. But what they've also done, and this is more of a development since we last met, Cigna's a really wellness-focused company, and I know also so is the town of Edenton. Y'all have been doing biometric screenings for a long time. And what Cigna initially offered was a $2,000 wellness credit where you could take the $2,000 and spend it on anything you wanted as long as it was for the better health of your employees and their family members. But what we knew is that you had a current vendor relationship with your biometric screening company that you've had for a long time, and we asked them if they would consider allowing you to continue that relationship, because part of Cigna's offer is biometric screenings performed by them are complimentary. So the town may be spending $12,000 to $15,000 a year on the screenings, but you'd have to use Cigna as the vendor, and we were asking if you could continue to use your current vendor and they might subsidize it. And what they offered was a $7,000 wellness credit that you could use to help pay for those screenings with that vendor, or you could still actually have Cigna as your vendor for free and have $7,000 to use towards any wellness programs that you decide on. Those could be seminars, it could be a rewards program. If employees did something, you hand out some amount of money, or give gym membership discounts. I've seen companies do t-shirts and hats based on something that you'd use to work out. So you can pretty much use it on anything you'd like. And the $7,000 is just a first year only credit, whereas the biometric screenings, if performed by Cigna, is something you would get complimentary each year you had Cigna coverage. So when you think about the $40,000, you'd have to add in some amount of savings depending on whether you continue to use your current vendor or use them. I don't think we really have to vote on what vendor to choose going forward tonight, but just wanted you to have that information. Any questions on how that works? Cigna also offers some additional wellness programs that are no cost to you, and they're optional for your employees to participate in. But some examples might be if they go and complete a health assessment online, they're given a gift card or a reward, or if they have their biometric screening done, they're given another reward. And then the apps and tools that Cigna provides show them different ways they can choose certain behaviors that would continue to give them some amount of rewards. And some of that may be additional discounts at gyms, and of course there are not too many around here that are the national chains, but it is quite a bit more robust than First Carolina Care in that area. But the idea is they take some of the data, whether it's from the screenings or the assessments and the ongoing things that employees do, and they have wellness coaches and they have case management, and they reach out to those people. The employee or the spouse, they don't have to participate. They can say, don't call me anymore. But they're ideally going to help them in suggesting steps, decisions on taking medications if they know so-and-so is on this and all of a sudden they stopped, or just how to manage their care, where to go, how to go about it, and helping them through that. And the idea would be that would save the town some money over time if somebody's helping them with those decisions. But I do think the piece I touched on last time was the fact that Cigna is something called level funded self-insurance. I just wanted to highlight that again. So most larger businesses or municipalities that are self-insured, you pay the claim cost each month based on how many claims your employees had, and then you pay some fixed costs for reinsurance. What level funded means is you still pay those things, but your bill will be the same every month. The employee only costs by however many employee only, how many spouse. So regardless of what the claims do, you don't have to worry about that variability or exposure. The difference compared to what you're doing with First Carolina Care is if at the end of the year, if they've projected a certain amount of claims and you fall below that figure, you have a surplus, and you can share in that surplus where they'll give you a check for 50% of what the surplus was. But in the first year, they have to set aside some money for something called terminal reserve. And that's really, if you decided to leave them after year one, there's some run out that happens where if a claim occurred in June, it's probably not going to hit their books till July or August, but yet you don't pay premiums for August and once you leave them. So I don't think I'd put a whole lot of value or emphasis in your decision based on expecting a surplus check in year one, because the amount they project, they have to take some and set it aside each month. But in years 2, 3, and long term, I do think there's some value to being self-insured. What y'all are doing with the screenings and really just the emphasis on wellness already, plus some of these new Cigna programs, you could argue you're a good fit for this so that the insurance company doesn't just keep all the premiums in the good years. And you have had the last 2.5 years have been years where you would have potentially had a surplus if you were on one of these programs. But just thinking about our conclusions, and you asked for our recommendation, I think Cigna they haven't underpriced you. I was very surprised that they held their offer based on the high risk or high claimants that we had to share. But their view is the majority of that risk is more on First Carolina Care's books. And, sure, they probably have some starting July 1st, but not enough that scared them away. So when we look at the amount they're setting aside for claims, and we look at, really what are our concerns about, you taking the savings this year and getting a 20% increase next year, what's the likelihood of that happening versus First Carolina Care and their track record with a lot of stability. And I think the other thing that's important to know is that First Carolina Care each company has a trend increase, which is really what they feel like the cost of care is going up each year based on not your people's claims, but everybody in the state or nationally, based on the technology getting more expensive, the brand name drugs that are exorbitant costs. So First Carolina Care uses 4.5%, and nobody else uses 4.5%, but Cigna's at 7.5%. So what that usually means is when you get a renewal, if your average age and male to female ratios don't change, your starting point with First Carolina is 4.5, where your starting point with Cigna is 7.5. And so that piece is the stability portion to keep in mind with First Carolina Care. That said, your starting point with Cigna is 6% lower, which more than makes up for that, and then with the wellness credits in addition. And our belief is that the free market will determine your cost more so than what trend each company is using every year, in the same way it has where First Carolina Care's renewal started at 4.5% and quickly went to 0%. So when we look at, what would I say is fiscally responsible, I feel like a move to Cigna is not a concern based on just stability, except there's one exception maybe in that if you have 2 really high claim years over the next 3 to 5 year period, it is my belief that the average spend over those 3 to 5 years would likely be a little lower with First Carolina Care. So you'd have to believe, or have the concern about that risk enough so to leave the savings on the table. And I say that because Cigna's not really in the business of running clients off in year one, even if you have a higher than normal year. First Carolina Care is having some large claims that they're having to pay right now, and they'll be factored into your renewal next year as well. Cigna gets a clean start without those, so I think that factor kind of offsets. But when it comes to Cigna releasing your renewal next year, they're only basing it on 8 or 9 months. And what insurance companies do is they look at a manual rate factor. They look at other employers with similar characteristics So your renewal is only based about half on your people's claims and the other half on what the averages are, where the First Carolina Care renewal will be based almost completely on your people's claims, which happen to be a little bit higher here in the last few months. So I think the net of those two things cancels out pretty easily in year one. I don't see that exposure, but if it comes to the next 3 or 5 years, if you've got a really ugly claim year in more than 1 year, you're less marketable. And when we don't have that leverage, Cigna's more likely to hold wherever they feel like you should be priced. First Carolina Care, it's a nonprofit model. They're using a lower trend assumption. So it's only when the free market isn't in play that I have a concern about this move. But I think over the next 24 months, it's very minimal. I don't think it's irresponsible to choose the savings now. What I would say is, whether you stayed with First Carolina or went to Cigna, I would budget for a little higher increase based on all those things combined, just from being conservative and not passing on all the savings wherever, that you want to have a bucket that you might expect 10 to 15% next year is your worst case. And that can always be higher. I hope it'll be lower, but we just had an employer with Cigna in their first year, similar demographic to you, similar size, and they had an awful year claims-wise. And Cigna started at 30%, and they still ended up at 12%. So that's kind of where I'm coming from there. That it's not just a crystal ball, it's something we've seen very recently. So my recommendation, I don't think you can go wrong with either. I would probably lean you towards Cigna, just because the savings are real and it's the bird in the hand mentality. But think about maybe the non-monetary considerations when it comes to changing insurance companies. You have employees and their family members that there's just that unknown. We feel like Cigna is a great company to do business with. They've treated our clients well, and more so than a lot of the other big names. And really, that first month of transition is always bumpier than not doing anything at all. And where we see that most is in pharmacy. You'll see the pre-authorizations and step therapy or quantity limits. All insurance companies have those restrictions, but once you do it, maybe if somebody did it with First Carolina 2-3 years ago, it's kind of on file. But when you switch to a new insurance company, that first month's prescription, they have to get their doctor to fill out whatever the Cigna form is, and the Cigna people have to reapprove, and it's not that they're going to deny more. It depends on the drug. Some of it will be a little less restrictive with Cigna, some of it may be a little bit more. But I think we also see some tiers. Somebody might be on a tier 2 drug that goes to a tier 3. It could easily be vice versa. But those are the areas where we see the most turbulence in terms of transition. But I think that those are my main points. I'd love to open it up for more questions to y'all.
Council members, anybody have any questions for Rand?
What I'm hearing you say is that you think the responsible thing is to probably go with Cigna.
I think if you're just looking at a 2-year period, risk reward, I feel like that's where I would lean you.
So if you were sitting up here, what would you do?
I would vote for Cigna. I hate it because I love First Carolina Care, and I think it's a great model and a great partnership. That's what's had me torn about it all.
I've just got one quick question, and I'm sorry I wasn't here at the last meeting. I was at the league annual meeting. I'm assuming, hate to do that Cigna is just as well thought of at our hospitals and our doctor's offices around here as First Carolina was. And
they are, and I'd say probably a little more so, just the national company that they are. First Carolina uses MedCost as a network, which is great in North Carolina, but Cigna still has more providers in North Carolina than MedCost. And what's also worth pointing out is our people can only go to North Carolina-based providers to get in-network care unless it's an emergency out of state. And with Cigna, there's still their national network in all 50 states. So if somebody wanted to go to a Mayo Clinic or an MD Anderson for something really specialized, they would have a lot more protection with Cigna.
That's a big deal.
And there's still out-of-network coverage with First Carolina Care, but it's, a whole separate bucket of out-of-pocket costs. And we've run what we call a geo-access report to look at that kind of thing, just to be safe. And I think it's important to know some of the larger employers in your area that are self-insured use the Cigna network, so it's not as if it's untested in this area.
I just want to ask that because
Sure.
that didn't happen one year for our employees.
Well,
We remember well. We heard enough complaints that we remember well,
which
should have happened, by the way. They should have complained.
was that a year with Cigna or another insurance?
No, I think it was another insurance company.
I think I'm not sure if you're remembering the move to First Carolina, but I think some of the heartburn there were some of your employees that are a little north of here were getting some care in Virginia, and that they now couldn't get that care treated as in-network.
Cigna offers more wellness program opportunities than First Carolina Care.
They do, and at the same time, they offer more than anybody, so it's not as if First Carolina Care is inferior, but most of theirs are more in case management than actual wellness incentives.
And Cigna doesn't charge, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Council members, any further questions or comments?
So Tammy, you being a town employee and you being the one who has to monitor this pretty much, where are you? Hate to put you on the spot, but
Yeah, we've had
it's
a really,
important.
really good relationship with First Carolina. It's been really good. A move is always a big deal because employees and their dependents and getting everybody, we have to do a whole new re-enrollment with everybody. It's a big undertaking. But I understand there's a big cost savings on the table, so we'll do what we have to do.
That it? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you all.
We appreciate it. And that's good news, by the way. I feel more enlightened by what we just heard than I did in the first presentation. Because
Yeah, we weren't sure.
I think in our minds, we kind of closed Cigna out, assuming they wouldn't want us after the pending claims that we'll get.
Right.
there's so many unknowns.
Yeah.
And that was on me. I didn't want to spend all the time talking about it when I didn't think it was going to hold
Yeah,
either.
no, good surprise every now and then. Nothing wrong with that.
It's nice to have options.
Yes, it is. Okay. Well, thank you for coming back and sharing the information with us. Are we on, what's our timeline on this?
So I was actually going to ask, is this something y'all would be voting on tonight or another day, or how does that work?
Well, it's in a special meeting. We can vote on it. We can entertain a motion tonight.
Yeah.
If the council feels comfortable with the input that we've gotten collectively about the comparison between the two,
Right.
then, yeah, I'll probably call for a motion since I think I can't see where time would benefit that delaying that decision.
So, yeah, I think that would be my suggestion, because
Yeah.
we've got employee meetings scheduled for next week, and we'll have to...
Because when you left here last time, it was, come on, let's go, right?
That was my
Yeah.
conflict last time, is we want to have enough time for, putting everything
Exactly.
together, and
Yeah,
so we're a little tight as of today.
right. Okay.
All righty.
All right, well, thank you again,
Yeah.
man, for making the trip back and sharing the good news with an option that we now have that we didn't have, 2 weeks ago. Very good. All right, council members, the chair would entertain a motion that we accept the offer that was made by Cigna that was just articulated by our advisor, the Soaring Group, with Rand recommendation. There's a lot of money to be saved. The network is expanded. I don't see any benefit staying other than the familiarity with it, but our responsibility is to spend the taxpayers' money wisely and get the biggest bang for the buck with that. And I think we've been given a clear option whereby the Cigna package would be what I would vote for if I were able to.
I will make that motion, Mayor.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the Cigna offer as presented by the Soaring Group here tonight. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carried. We'll put that in motion, please, sir.
Great.
All right. Thanks again for coming.
Yep, thank you.
That's almost a penny on our, $40,000. Yeah.
Almost what, Mayor?
It's almost a penny in
Yeah.
our tax.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rand.
Did we just say? Okay, very good. Great way to start the evening. Now we'll roll into our committee meetings for the night. We'll hear from all four, beginning with administrative, and that's chaired by Councilman Biggs, please, sir.
Well, Mayor, we only have one item on the agenda tonight, which is totally unusual, but glad that it is only one. We're glad to have our town attorney, Hood Ellis, with us tonight so that he can review the proposed covenants for properties that are owned by the town of Edenton to be sold. Anne Marie put in her notes that we have been working with the town attorney on the proposed covenants, and it appears that the Penelope Barker Foundation has the organizational capacity to accept or hold the covenants. She also has that, thank you, we have the Honorable Chris Bean with us also tonight, who is the chairman of the Penelope Barker Foundation. So, Hood, if you would, tell us what we need to know.
We'll try. I would love to have a set of covenants that I put in front of you, but I'm not quite that far along on it. Elizabeth can help me some tonight because she's been more involved with it probably than I have. I met with her and Anne Marie a month or so ago, and we decided that, again, these redevelopment properties that you're going to be acquiring and conveying are going to have certain restrictions on them. I think in your package you've got a page in there that shows you some of the restrictions that are already in place by virtue of our UDO, our building code. Some of them are going to be in the historic district, and we'll have those covenants on them. But these are going to be covenants that our plan is to put them in the deed to the property so that the property owner that acquires that property from the towns will know from the get-go what the towns expects of them with regard to the property. And I think we've decided we've got two kinds of properties, contributing and non-contributing. Contributing would be something that we want to, it's historical. It's enough to protect and preserve and try to keep the historical integrity of the property in line. A non-contributing would be one that, really doesn't offer much from a historical perspective, so that we could not have different set of covenants for each type of property. The commission is going to be the holder of the covenants, to administer the covenants. They, I think, agreed in principle to do that. I'm sure they will want to see them before they look at them and agree to adopt them and administer them, but that's going to be the sort of the overall supervisor in terms of the covenants that we put on the property for purposes of the preservation. Again, it's going to have things like, we're going to have, in addition to what they can do and not do with the property, things like when they got to start construction. Not so something doesn't sit there indeterminately and nothing happens. We're going to have a start date and a finish date. Something, that we can, obviously it's going to need to be a little liberal to give people a chance to put financial plans in place to do the construction and what needs to be done. But again, hopefully to have a schedule in the covenants, and then some obligations to continue the maintenance of it after it's done. But that's sort of the overall umbrella and picture of what we got in mind, and now it's just a matter of putting some I's and T's, some stuff on paper that you'll be able to look at and hopefully adopt as 2 sets of covenants for, again, contributing properties and non-contributing properties. Elizabeth?
You covered it, I think.
Okay.
You on?
Just one correction to what you said, and Hood made the right reference in there. It's actually the Edenton Historical Commission who would be administering the covenants, and we presently are doing that on some property in Edenton, the oldest house in North Carolina, and also St. John's, now St. George's Church. Hood, have you seen our covenants?
Yes, that's one of the several sets I have to go
Okay,
by.
all right.
So you're good? As far as where we're all up to date now?
Yes.
Just one quick thing, you know, I know that, you know, contributing sometimes means a certain age, but there are some good, not quite that old buildings that are gonna be, each year that goes up. So I just wanna make sure we protect the really good stuff that might not be, you know, 50 years old. Just think that's-
1920, was that the?
We used our last National Register update, I think, and so at that time it was somewhere around the 20s, I think is what we said.
Yeah,
So
Anyway, just, when you get a copy, I think I'll probably have some comments.
I had a question. I noticed the address for the Penelope Barker Foundation is 107 West Church Street.
Well, that's not correct.
It's not correct, okay. Okay.
Any other questions while we have these 2 gentlemen here, or Elizabeth?
Sounds like you've got it covered pretty well, which we would expect no less.
Well, I have my assignment, and I have two ladies who are breathing down hard on getting something done. So I can assure you that sooner or later I'll get it done.
I see her foot kicking.
Well, at that time, we'll bring it back to this committee, and then if everybody likes it, we'll send it on to full council. How about that? Good, thank you. Chris, thank you for being here. Mayor, that's all we have.
All right, very good. Next, our Utilities Committee will meet, and that's chaired by Councilman Bond, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Mayor, we only have one item this evening. The resolution of North Carolina Industrial Development Fund Grant, Peanut Drive Water Main Loop Project. You got something for me there, Corey?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, the only thing I have is just a couple of quick slides regarding this project. This is something that's in the preliminary stages. Anyway, so I did want to provide y'all kind of some background material on what we're discussing. So if we look at the North Edenton area from Paradise, which is here going towards US or NC 17 and also 17 business. The program that or the project that we're looking at would be installing a 10-inch water main just beyond Batham Road, closest to the former railroad easement that runs behind the Chowan Graphic and Stop Shop Convenience Center. And will work its way north and actually tie in to the back edge of Peanut Drive, closest to the Jumbo's industrial site. This is roughly 3,600 feet of pipe. Some key points on this project is that the amount of the grant is $473,000. And what's very favorable about this opportunity is that there is no local cash match. And also that there are no job creation requirements for our local industry as a result of this. Some of the things that Chief Bass and I have spoken about from a fire safety and also public works utilities redundancy is along with additional fire safety and resilience out for our industrial customers, but we also will improve the reliability for our residential customers closest to Paradise Road, as well as our industrial customers on Peanut Drive. So this is kind of a bird's eye view of the project in its early stages. We'll have a lot more and probably many updates once we get a little further along into this. But that's pretty much all I've got, unless Chief Bass has anything or there are any questions or comments about the extension.
Any questions? Thank you, Corey.
All right.
Anybody on the committee have anything they want to say or add to it? Mayor, we send this on.
Very good, all right, sir.
Thank you, sir.
That's be a huge help. I mean, that dead end out there at Peanut Drive, what I've learned in my course of time here about water flow and the ongoing battle we have with trihalomethanes and stuff, anytime it dead ends, it just exacerbates that situation, helps create the problem.
Yep.
So we can keep it moving, plus as you just articulated, the benefits to the firefighting capabilities in the area. It's good stuff.
Yep.
Look forward to seeing, is it underway? Did I see a trench being dug down that path?
No, that was part of the stormwater improvements that we
Okay.
made before hurricane season.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Corey.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you, Councilman Bond. Moving now to Public Works Committee. That'll be chaired by Councilman Stallings, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and we have one item tonight as well. And it's the proposed amendments to the lease agreement for the land lease for Penelope Barker House. And again, we have our town attorney and Honorable Chris Beam with us to go over that with us and tell us what we got to do there. So,
Jim, can I say something before we get going?
Absolutely.
I wonder, I've been looking at this, and, I think I can't see why we don't donate the land to the Penelope Barker Foundation with an easement around it. I mean, in 100 years, what would be the worst thing that would happen to that land would be somebody else would then say, well, move the Barker House. I mean, I think that, I just think we do it and then we put an easement around it and then it's theirs. I just can't imagine that we really want to, I mean, my family was involved in moving the cupola, or buying the cupola house in 1918. I mean, I don't see why we got to revisit that. Even my great-grandchildren were here, we got to revisit this. I just think, that's so iconic for our town. It's sort of what everybody says, and we just give the footprint of what the land is on, and then an easement around it to do whatever else they want to do, and then we're done with it. I think that would be what I would prefer. I'm on the Edenton Historical Commission, not on the Penelope Barker Foundation, but I'm on both boards, but it just seems to be, unless there's some prohibition, we can't give land. If there's some, it's public land, we can't do that. But I just think we ought to go ahead and end it and do it and be done with it. Because I don't think there's a single person up here that wants the Barker House to ever change where it is. That's true.
I guess that would be something for you to address.
Well, again, I guess that's an option that hadn't been discussed. I mean, it may be one that we need to follow up on. The one I think Judge Bean and I were here to talk about is the one that handles what's in place already, and morph it into viable existing entities. And
But I mean, I don't want to go through all that if we're going to then possibly, if we're going to possibly then not do that. I mean, I think that really, I'd like to see, let's put it on the table to try to get the donation of the land instead of going through a lease and doing all that. And, I mean, that's what I would much prefer to do. I think that, I really think that people on the council, I'm not speaking to anybody else, but it just seems to be the prudent thing to do is to go ahead and just donate the land with an easement around it instead of, going through all this. I mean, I'll leave it up to you as your committee, but, that's what I'd love to see done.
Is that a viable
next time.
option or a viable thing to do?
Again, we hadn't really looked at it. I'm sure that it's viable, but again, as you know, once you give away public town property, you got several hoops you have to jump through. And I don't know whether that exposes the property or not. I know what we've got right now is a way to try to use what's already been in place and been in place since 1977 to try to just perpetuate. But again, if that's an option you want us to look at, we can certainly do that. I don't necessarily know that it's one counteracts another. I think you can probably do both. You could probably do the one that came before you as far as dealing with the lease that's in place. And then if you decide you want to just do away with that and deed the property later on, we can look at it and see what kind of hoops you got to jump through to do that.
It's kind of a waste of time, but I mean.
This one, I don't think this is a very complicated. What I was going to suggest, Councilman Stallings, is to let Chris sort of give you a brief overlay of the history of why we've got an issue to deal with, and then I can tell you what we've come up with to try to resolve it.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we move forward with what we've got before us, and then let Hood look into
Well, I mean, Hood,
what you're
could you have
suggesting.
it done by the next meeting? Just tell us what, so if we want to vote on, if we want to do a deed next, if we want to try to move forward doing a deed next meeting instead of a lease. I just personally think we just don't need to leave it to chance. We need to go ahead and get it done and, just do it one fell swoop and be done with it. But if anybody else feels differently about that.
It's a good idea.
Chris?
Well, this has really been sort of an interesting situation, and it speaks to the goodwill of a lot of people over many, many years. Back when all of this started in 1952, the property where the Barker House was, of course, is where P&Q store was built, and Mr. Tizik gave the Barker House to move it off to 3 organizations here in town. When he did that, there was never any kind of written agreement. There was never a deed. There was never a bill of sale. There was nothing. The house rolled down Broad Street. And the town very kindly said, here, you can put it on our piece of land. No lease, no agreement, no nothing. And so, all these years, things went along like that. And then, I don't know what happened in 1976, but there was a lease that was entered into for 99 years. I think it was 1977, and so the lease that it would have been in effect goes to 2076. That lease was entered into by the town of Edenton and Historic Edenton, Inc. Well, that is an organization that at one point did exist in Edenton, but they never had any claim to the Barker House. And then they dissolved in 1980, and they did not distribute any rights they had. They didn't do anything. They just dissolved. So all of a sudden, all these years since 1980, the town has not had a lease with anybody. The Historical Commission has been operating all these years right there on the town's property with no lease, no right to operate. So that's how this all came about, is we're trying to put this in a proper kind of form for the people who come down the road 50 years from now, they can see. What the Historical Commission is asking the town to do, and what Hood and Anne Marie and I had discussed, was extending that 1977 lease on the same terms, but it would actually be between the Penelope Barker Foundation and the town of Edenton. The Edenton Historical Commission, it was created by the state of North Carolina. And what sort of alarmed us was several years ago, the legislature said they were going to abolish all commissions in North Carolina. Well, that would have included us. It was a cost-cutting kind of move. And then they discovered that they've never given us a dime in all these years. So we looked at our bylaws and saw that if we were dissolved, for whatever reason, then all of our property goes to the state of North Carolina. That's a real concern to us because we want this property to remain in Edenton, be controlled by Edenton people just exactly like it has since the very beginning when this informal arrangement came about. So what we had talked about was extending the lease, and the Penelope Barker Foundation would actually lease back the property to the Edenton Historical Commission for so long as the Edenton Historical Commission existed, and nothing would ever change as far as what we're doing. I mean, all the programs would go on, nobody would ever know the difference. It's all the same. But it just changes the legal titles, and there would be written documents. Also, the other thing that is before you is a quitclaim deed to the Penelope Barker Foundation for the Barker House. As I told you, there's no paperwork on record. So who owns the Barker House? The town of Edenton may have the superior claim because it's been sitting on a foundation on the town's land all these years, or the Edenton Historical Commission, who has paid for and done everything to maintain, would have a equitable claim at least to that. So what we're trying to do is just what we've asked Hood to do is just get us on the right track so that everything's legal and right. One thing that we would have to have from the town council is a resolution that the Penelope Barker Foundation could sublet the property to the Edenton Historical Commission. That was a term, Hood, I just happened to notice in that old lease that there has to be a resolution if you want to sublet it. So that's, yes, sir.
I'm telling my mind about what I've heard for years, but there's no deed to it. It's our property.
What?
That's what I've heard.
What, the land or what?
What's on the land belongs to the land.
Well, that, in North Carolina law, when something's affixed to land, it's considered as real estate.
Okay, but there's another thing, who pays the taxes on it?
Nobody, because it's a nonprofit. The town doesn't pay any taxes on the town's land, and the Edenton Historical Commission's never paid any taxes because it's a nonprofit corporation.
Does it automatically come like that or what?
Does it what?
Is that an automatic thing or about?
Well, yes, it is, and that's the way it's been for, I guess, 100 years or so.
So if we deeded it over, we wouldn't lose any tax.
No, you would not be losing anything at all, financially.
except for the title of the land would change. So,
Yeah, I think, that, really all we're talking about doing is acknowledging what we've always understood was that the town doesn't own the Barker House. They just agreed that they could put the Barker House on our land, so we're just acknowledging that we don't own it. We do own the land. We've leased the land to Historic Edenton for 99 years, and all we're doing on that is acknowledging that they no longer exist. So we're gonna change our lessee and tenant from Historic Edenton to the Penelope Barker Foundation. So, I mean, those are the two things to try to, make it right and bring it current.
So I don't think there's any decision to make as to what we need to do. We need to send this on to full council and get this proposal as they've done here. And hearing the history of it from Chris, I'm more inclined to agree with what you said. We need to look into that. So, Sambo, you and Reverend Poole, if it's okay with you.
I'm fine to send it on with the idea that Hood brings us back up.
Okay.
Tell us whether we have another option. I mean, it might be the land was bought with a grant and you can't do it. I mean, I don't know what the title is.
Well, we need to go ahead and pass a resolution so you can own the house, right? Somebody's got to own the house.
Well, we've got two separate.
We can't even lease it to somebody that doesn't own it, can we? I mean, this thing is loose ends all over.
We can't really pass it in a committee meeting, though.
No.
Well, we gotta send it to full council.
Conveying all of your interest in the house. You're saying you have no interest in the house.
Right.
Period.
But
We
you
just
said
don't
we
want
had to pass a resolution. The council had to pass a resolution that would enable the Penelope Barker Foundation to lease it back to the historic.
That's for the land,
Yeah,
not the house.
okay.
They're two sort of separate things.
So I'm real interested in somebody owning the house. Have you heard that?
It was donated by, what's the store there now?
Furniture store.
Yeah, the furniture store up on Broad Street, that's where it was. And it was donated and rolled down Broad Street and put right there.
I understand a Coke bottle was sitting on a table in that house.
No, on the chimneys.
Okay. Did fall.
I'm not on this committee, but one thing that has amazed me through this whole conversation is that a handshake used to work.
And up until this very year, it has continued.
Yeah. Let's get it right.
That's all we have, Mayor.
That's very interesting. The most concern I had in listening to the story was the fact that it was almost lost to the state of North Carolina.
Yeah.
And that's what triggered all of our
Correct.
work.
Yes.
And that's why I think we just need to go ahead and settle it once and all be done with it. I just don't see how we lose.
All right. Interesting.
So that's going to full council.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. And thank you, gentlemen, for your history lesson. We're moving now.
The history lesson was very
Interesting. We're moving
interesting.
now to our Finance Committee meeting. That's chaired by Councilman Dixon, please.
So we got two things. We got, let's see, the first one's we got the cell tower at the wastewater treatment plant, and I think we all talked about it before, and they've accepted our $250,000 one-time upfront payment. And I think we should take that just about as quickly as we can.
And run with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, if all y'all think we should send that on to full council, we should. Okay, all right. And then the budget amendment on the municipal building roof repair, do you want to talk about that, or?
Bud is available.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
As you go into the back door of Town Hall, you have the stoops right there.
Well, you have a basement. I don't know if anybody's ever been in a basement of town hall, but one door goes into the back of the town hall, the other one goes to the basement. Well, you got a roof that runs all the way up to another little roof on the second floor. Well, that roof is rotten. And if you notice at the stoop there, it says a 4x4 there now. It used to be some type of pillar right there, but it rotted about 3 years ago. So we put a 4x4 there, knowing that we were going to have to place a roof. And so we've known it's been getting bad, but about 2 months ago, we had a little moisture problem upstairs, and we noticed where it was coming from, the flashing on that rotten roof. Well, I got some quotes on it, but they were afraid to go on the roof, because if you go out there and look at it, they'd fall through if they went there to try to fix the flashing. So we got to replace the roof. And it's just a stoop that goes over the back door with a new column, and it runs up to the second floor. It's about, I don't know, so about 4 foot wide, about 20 feet up, 30 feet up, something like that. But it's got to be done.
And how much is it going to be?
I think about $3,000, something like that. Yeah.
I think it was 5. Was it 5? 3 or 5? Was it 3 or 5? Do you remember? The cost?
Oh, 3. I think it's a little
okay.
over 3, 3,100, something like that.
So that's a budget amendment, we just send that on to full council.
Yeah, it's got to be done. It's just to be a matter of time before it starts leaking down real bad, so.
You can't not fix it.
You can't, right, you can't not fix it. Yeah.
That's all we got, man.
Thank you. And that completes our agenda for tonight as well. Before we leave, council members, I've distributed a resolution that was drafted by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, I think is the name of the year for that organization. And anyway, there was a meeting called of all the mayors who are elected to Inner Banks communities, Manio, Plymouth, Elizabeth City, Columbia. It was held down in Manio. The secretary of the environmental cabinet was there, and this resolution was drafted, and all the mayors present were asked to sign it. We can't sign anything like this as a mayor. We have to get the approval from you all before anybody could enter into an agreement for the town of Edenton. And what it has to do with is offshore drilling. And so that I wasn't at the meeting, but I had in my mind that it was pretty much a one-sided event, that all the things wrong with offshore drilling were going to be talked about. And sure enough, if you read this, there's a lot of forevers and all those kinds of words in the resolution. So I would just ask that y'all read it, and at a future meeting, if you want to pass it and submit it, we'll do so and send it back to the State Department of Environmental Quality. So anyway, that's just for your late night reading. Okay, and we're done. Thank y'all for being here tonight. Meeting is adjourned. Enjoy the rest of your...
Thank you, Hood.
Have a safe trip. Have a safe trip.
Okay, thank you. And you too.
Okay.